Hey guys, today we're going to do a quick review on domain and range. This is not the first time you see it, but we're going to be looking at it with exponential functions. I'm going to review linear so that you can do the exponential function part on your own. Just like before, answer the questions as we move along. And just really quickly, what do you remember about domain and range? Answer the question. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So domain. Domain is the set of all possible x values. And it's written using values from left to right because your x-axis goes left to right. So you start with the leftmost and go to the rightmost. So we're going to start by looking at domain. Remember, an open circle, so when it's open, empty, it means that you're going to use the symbols less than or greater than. There is no equal to sign there. Anything else, if it's a closed circle or even if there is no circle there, you're going to use, it is equal to at that point, so you're going to use the less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. Okay. And what I like to do is, depending on what they're asking for, domain or range, I always like to begin with my symbols and the letters. So in this case, domain, which is my x values. Domain is my x values, so I like to start with the less than symbol. The less than symbol. I don't know which way it shows up on you. No. Less than. And then the variable x, and then another less than symbol. Because I know x is going to be between my left value and my right value. Okay? So that's how I determine my domain or my range. So let's look at an example. So here's a linear example. Again, we've done linear already. I'm going to start off with the less than x, less than. So I go to my leftmost point. Oh, sorry, before we get there. I'm only looking at my x value, so I highlighted my x-axis. Again, your x-axis is the one that goes left to right. So I start with the leftmost point on the graph. That's the line that's graphed for me. Not the coordinate plane, but the actual graph. My leftmost point is right here. And I take that and I just move it on up to the x-axis. Notice that once I transfer it up to the x-axis, I'm at -4. Okay, so that means my leftmost point is -4. I move on to my symbol because you remember back over here where we talked about what kind of symbols to use. An open circle means no equal to, and a closed means less than or equal to. I always start off with no equal to because I can easily add a line if needed. And in this case, we do have a closed circle, which is not an open circle, so that means we are going to use an equal to. Okay? So let's move to my furthest right point. If you notice, my furthest right point is over here. We're going to bring that, in this case, down to the x-axis. And at my x-axis, it lands on 6. So my furthest right point is 6. And just like before, we're going to look at my type of circle. If it's an open circle, I leave the symbol as is. I leave this inequality symbol right here as is. If it's anything other than an open circle, in this case, a closed circle, I go ahead and put the line underneath it, meaning or equal to. So all this means is that my domain is -4 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 6. This whole boundary right here is what this line is on my domain. So x can be any value between -4 and +6. All these little numbers that lie in between all of this is a possible value of x for this particular function. All right, let's look at another one. Again, I'm looking for my domain, so I'm going to start with the less than x less than. And I'm going to start by looking for my leftmost, I keep forgetting. I'm going to look at my x-axis. I highlighted that for a reason because it's important. I highlighted my x-axis because those are the only numbers I care about. I don't care about any other numbers except for the ones that show up right here on my x-axis. So start with your leftmost point. In this case, it's this one right here that's highlighted. And I'm going to take that and move it up to the x-axis. So if you notice at the x-axis, the leftmost point is actually -5. So I'm starting with -5 on the left-hand side. Now let's go back to see what kind of symbol it's going to be. Notice at the end, we have an open circle. An open circle means it is not equal to, so we use the symbol less than or greater than. I always start off with the less than because that's the direction that we're going. Oh. Less than. Regardless, we're always going that way, so we start with the less than. We'll eventually flip it if need be, and you'll see that in the further example. Where was I? Oh, so it's an open circle. So that means there is no line underneath it. So notice I'm going to leave it blank down here. Nothing fancy, just leave it as is. Okay, so now we go to the furthest right point. So here's my furthest right point on this line. And I bring that to the x-axis, and notice it lands on +4. So +4 is the furthest right point of this function. I go and look at the end point, or what there is there. It's not an open circle, it is a closed circle. So that means it is going to be equal to at that point. So I put my little line underneath the less than sign. So that means my domain for this particular function is -5 is less than x is less than or equal to 4. So every single number that lies between -5, not including -5, all the way to +4, yes, including 4, is a possible value of x for this particular function. All right, I'm going to have you try this one on your own. You want to find the domain of this. Sorry, flying. Okay. So let's do another domain example. Again, I'm going to start off with the less than, x less than. And I'm only looking at my x values. I remember this time. So that's the horizontal axis right here. Start with my furthest left point, which is right here, which I've highlighted for you. I'm going to bring that to my x-axis. If I bring that to my x-axis, I notice that that is at the value of 2. So 2 is the furthest left point. I go back and look. Is that an open or something else? It is an open circle. So that means no line underneath the inequality symbol. So it's not equal to. So I leave it as is. Notice it got left as is. Okay. Sorry, there were messages coming in and I was getting distracted. So now I move on to my furthest right point. But there is something interesting here. I see an arrow. An arrow means it's going to keep going on forever and ever. This line goes on even when it's not even part of the page anymore. And you'll notice you can't even see it. So because it's going on, there really isn't an end point. Oh, let me go back to my mouse. There really is no end point there. So actually I can go ahead and drop that other part of the inequality. So I just have, notice this went away. 2 is less than x, and everything keeps going. I brought an arrow down here because it's going to go on forever in the positive direction after the number 2. So we would write this as 2 is less than x, or more commonly you'll see it as x is greater than 2. The great mathematicians always put the variable first if it's just a variable in a number. Another way you'll see this is written in words is all real numbers greater than 2. All right, another domain example. Again, I'm going to go ahead and start off with maybe less than x less than. I'm going to look for my furthest. I'm going to start by looking at my x-axis. That's the only one I care about. So I look at my furthest left point. Again, I notice there's an arrow here, which means there is no left point. On my right side, there's another arrow, which means there's no right point. So all that means when I have arrows on both ends, my answer is going to be all real numbers. No numbers needed. It just means every single number that can go from the negatives to the positives is included in this function. Again, because I could go and continue this line forever and ever and ever in both directions. There is no starting point. There is no stopping point. All right, so I want you to find the domain of this particular function. Notice there's an arrow and an arrow here. In case you can't tell, that is an arrow. All right, the next topic we're going to look at is range. It is going to be the same thing that we just did for domain, except instead of looking at your x values, you are now looking at the possible set of y values. And y goes up and down. So it's written using values from your low point to your high point. So we go from low to high. Oh, I went backwards, sorry. Same thing to remember, same ideas. If it's an open circle, you're not going to put a line underneath the inequality symbols. It's not going to be equal to, so it's just going to be a less than or a greater than. Now, if it's anything else, just like we had before, closed, or even if it's just touching the top or the bottom of the graph, it is going to be less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. The only difference now, instead of putting x, we're going to begin with y, because range is talking about your y values. And instead of going left to right, we are going low to high. I have to keep looking at the camera to see how it looks for y'all. All right, so let's try this one. Again, I start with the less than y, less than, and instead of looking at my x-axis, I am now going to be focusing on my y-axis only. Low to high. Let's look at the low point. I found the lowest part of the graph is right here. I take that and bring it over to my y-axis. I notice that that value on my y-axis is actually -4. So -4 is the low point of this particular function. I go back and look, is that an open circle? No, it's not. So this means that it is equal to at -4. So I put that bar underneath the inequality symbol to tell me less than or equal to. Now I'm going to go look at my high point. I'm going to bring that high point over to my y-axis. And I notice that that value on my y-axis is actually +6. So +6 is the high point of my range. So I then go and look at my circle that's there. Is it an open circle? It's not. So that means it is equal to at that point. So it's less than or equal to. So that means the range is every single number between -4 and 6. All we are doing is describing the possible values of y or x for each particular function. Okay, here's another one. We did these for domain, that's why they look familiar, but now we're finding the range on them. Again, I start off with y is, or less than y, less than. We're focusing on my y-axis. Sorry, I had a mistake there. So just the y values matter. And when it comes to range and the y, I'm going low to high. So I go to my lowest part of the graph. Maybe. There we go. The lowest part of the graph. And I bring that over to my y-axis. I notice that that point at the y-axis is at -2, so my lowest part of the graph is -2. And then I go back and look, is that an open circle? In this case, yes it is, which means it is not going to have the equal to underneath it, so I leave the inequality symbol as is. Now I go look at my high point. My high point is right there on the graph. I bring that over to my y-axis. And I notice that at my y-axis, the high point is actually at 3. So the highest point, I probably should put the 3 on the other side. The highest point is 3. I go back and look, is there an open circle? No open circle, which means it will be equal to at that part. And so my range in this case, remember low to high, is any number between -2 and 3, not including -2, because it does not equal -2. I had to go back and fix one more thing. I don't know if you caught the mistake, but the range is -2 is less than y is less than or equal to 3. Oh, come on. All right, here's one for you to try on your own. You want to find the range. Look for your low point, then look for your high point. All right, here's a bonus question. Try this range on your own. And that's it for today. I'll see you next time in class. If you have any questions, let me know.